and welcome to Capron's Cabin. I'm your host, Corey Capron, and tonight we bring you part two of our exploration of the original six Star Trek films, and kind of this look at whether or not the even films are vastly superior to the odd films, and whether or not you can just skip them altogether or whatnot. So, in part one, we of course covered 1, 2, and 3, and tonight, again, we have Todd Ristau, Sean McCord, and Doug Engalla with us to look at 4, 5, and 6. It's a part two is a bit interesting. I'll give you a couple of advance notices, and we're all getting a bit more personal and passionate. Nothing too extravagant, but it's there.
So 4 is a beloved film, and
Yes.
this is where I have to climb the mountain to try to challenge one of them.
It's a well-known tale.
Yeah. So my issues with 4 are, one thing is admittedly a bit petty, which is it falls into a trope that started to happen technically Meyer kind of kicked it off in 79 of Time After Time, but we see from the 70s into the mid 80s, or the 80s into the early 90s, usually with sequels, but whenever you have a story that's a little too expensive to do the world that it takes place in, either by time travel or dimensional portal, we bring them to contemporary 80s where we don't have to have a budget. Beastmaster 2, I'm trying to think of some of the better, the Doctor Who film did this, where, of all the big things that could have been an adventure in the movie, it's just them in contemporary London. Oops. And there were a lot of these, and I'm trying to do a couple of the other ones, but so when it came out, like in that wave of films where, Masters of the Universe was the big one, where everyone was like, we're going to get a Masters of the Universe film. And it's like 2 minutes of the actual fantasy world, and then we're just in the 80s. Doll Man also did it, but that's just a low budget film to begin with, so it's not even fair to pick on. But so that bugged me. I am notoriously not a fan of time travel. There are films that are good despite time travel, but I often find time travel, whether it's the grandfather paradox or what, it just gets hard for me, because it starts to just become suspend your disbelief. In this case, the director, the writer of the film, Mayer, who'd come back for 6 and did 2, had already done a time travel film that I like more. But also, I'm a Harlan Ellison fan. I City on the Edge of Forever, like you kind of done the great Star Trek time travel film, and it's sort of alien, and the gravitas of it, where as Star Trek moves forward, time travel just starts to get easy and problematic, because if you can just zip around the sun, that's what I don't like about time travel in general, is once it becomes available, why can't we use it all the time? Same thing in Harry Potter, onward and onward. But those are really my only criticisms of it. Like, some of the humor hasn't aged terrible. Well, no, actually, rewatching it was pretty funny.
So I'm gonna disagree with you on practically everything you just said.
Good.
First of all, they did not shoot in San Francisco to save money or because they had a lower budget. This isn't Battlestar 78. It was integral to the story, and they wanted to do a time travel story because the fans love time travel stories. Some of the more popular episodes of the original series that still held up.
Yeah.
were when they, when they went back, to the 60s and back to the 30s. It was a deliberate choice. And when Nimoy was given the opportunity to direct and contribute to the story, he specifically wanted to do something about how mankind was messing up the earth now, and how there'd be repercussions in the future. So it was kind of built in.
Yeah.
My middle child is graduating college this year, but and she had a class last year where they were studying. It was the history of San Francisco, and they were each had to pick a sort of a different era, and they were also looking at films of San Francisco. And they sent me the list and said, "You're from there. I grew up in the Bay Area. Said, you're from there. Are these the 10 best films about San Francisco?" And they were the ones you'd expect, including Time After Time and San Francisco, and some of the others. Said, "Yeah, but Star Trek 4 is not on the list." And I said this to her kind of kiddingly. She went back to her teacher. They went back to their teacher, and they came back to me and said, "My teacher would like to know why Star Trek 4 should be on the list." Okay, so I wrote up like a half-page thing why Star Trek 4 is one of the best films about San Francisco of the 80s. And I was actually invited. It was a Zoom class, and I was invited to come on and talk about the film and defend it. And it was great fun. And the whole class had to watch the film. So maybe we're making the next generation. And one of my favorite moments of history in the film is Sulu looking out at it as they're piloting over the city in their invisible Klingon ship and saying, "I was born there." It's a lovely moment. Also service to the fans, because the fans knew that he was born there, but it had never been established as far as I recall in the series or in the films before then.
Yeah, no, that is, I agree. That is my favorite scene as well, looking at it this last time going through.
And what the film does, it along with one of my, I know everybody's favorite episode is supposed to be, of the original series, is supposed to be City on the Edge of Forever. It's not, but that's not what this it's not my favorite, but that's not what this is about.
Till I pull out the script.
Yeah, exactly. My favorite episode of
I have the
series,
cartoon version of it, so
Nice.
my favorite episode of the original series is The Trouble with Tribbles, because it gives each character something to do.
That's true.
You're
That's
doing
right.
so well. No, I'm just kidding.
And that's what I love about this film. It gives each character something to do that makes sense for that character.
They all have their own mission in order to complete the task of bringing two humpback whales back into the 23rd century. 23rd century.
Yes.
I was trying to remember which version of Star Trek we're talking about.
And I do think that is one of the reasons it is some people's favorite of the movies, or right behind part 2, is that this is, of all of the films, the one that everybody really gets equal billing on, or as close to equal as we're ever going to get from a Star Trek.
It's also the most accessible for a lot of the audience who didn't, who don't rock on the actual show, but they go, "Oh, fish out of water. I like that kind of story,"
Right.
They do that with Crocodile Dundee in New York, right? But then they go ahead and that there is a mission in front of them, what they have to do about it, the science that goes into their tasks, and it's a if I told somebody like my wife that we're oh yeah, I've got Star Trek 4 on right now, and she'll say, "Which one is that?" I'll say, "It's the one with the whales."
Whales.
And she'll say,
"The whales!"
"Oh yes, I like that one. Yeah."
Yes.
Have you seen the others?
Yes.
No. Okay. Well.
No, it is the one that is character driven, that you don't have to get into. It's the one that doesn't have Asimov as its scientific consultant. But again, and I don't really disagree with you guys, but like, this is the task I've set myself out for. I would also say that that is its weakness, because when you have that many disparate narratives of Chekhov's breaking into this, Scotty is inventing transparent aluminum ahead of time, though. Fun fact, that actually became a reality in our lifetime. Transparent aluminum does exist, and it works largely the way he describes it. So that was cool. When you have that many stories and you're still trying to keep it in that time frame, suspension of disbelief, and you're also trying to make a fun-loving kind of hokey humor to it. This is not the, other than the environmental message, this is not the one where we're having the big existential questions about God or age or mortality. Or this is a bit more of the fun, approachable. When you put those two things together, a lot of things start to work out because the script says they do. Chekhov breaking into a military facility as a Russian and then he does get injured, but like them busting him out of the hospital, each one of those little steps just kind of works out. Where in the other movies, there are a few, like, you could argue breaking out of a prison or something like that shouldn't be as easy as they make it, but there's a lot more kind of convenience to keep the story rolling, where things just, even things like, oh, I just gave you the recipe for transparent aluminum, and you guys were able to manufacture that in like a couple of, actually, no, I think it's in a day. Like, that turnaround time, like it's a movie where I kind of have to turn my brain off to enjoy it. That's the worst I can say about it. It's a lot of fun. I agree with you guys.
Well, there are things that it had to do. Like, it had to have that level of Kirk as Earth's savior to get him off the hook for every rule he broke in the previous film.
Yes.
Right. So.
Also, if I may, real quick, though.
I also want to say, I neglected to mention Savick in our earlier discussion.
Oh, Savick was.
And I think it's worth mentioning, that's that moment of, like, changing the actor the way they did with Darren Stevens, right? And I personally think Robin Curtis does a terrific job with that character, and she brought such depth to it that was alluded to when Kirstie Alley played it, but it was never really there in that depiction. So I want to give a shout out to Robin Curtis.
Absolutely.
I also, I love looking closely at all things costume, and there were some things that happened in 3 costume wise, like the weird collar on Kirk's leather jacket, the McCoy's ascot, that were still kind of part of 4.
And
but
Chekhov as Little Lord Fauntleroy with that purple or pink suit or whatever it was.
But Chekhov's leather jacket is so much better than
Yes.
Yeah, no. My last attempt at criticizing probably the most beloved, in the sense of being beloved, of the films would just be also with those kind of convenience plot things. I never believed the female scientists going along with Kirk. It was kind of one of those things where at every step of the way I was like, don't let them in your truck, don't take him out to dinner. It was really one of those characters that is like, I will do this thing because the script told me to. But that's the worst I can throw at it.
Don't you think there was a little bit of an homage to, what was her name? Was it Edith Keeler?
She did have kind of an Edith Keeler-ish bent in terms of her passion for the future of the whales. Yeah.
I felt like that whole thing was not only thematically correct and convenient storytelling, another nod to the original series that I found endearing.
Yeah.
Kirk
And
is a flirt.
you're underestimating the sexual charisma of James T. Kirk on Women of the 20th Century.
Yes.
Also,
Buy me a pizza.
I love Shatner, flawed though he is.
I do too.
I'll confess this. I have a hard time listening to a lot of actors talk about their craft. But I love listening to Shatner talk about his work. And this is going to play a little bit into one of my criticisms of 5. So there's my teaser. I love that Shatner insists that he can't watch his own work. And he insists that even to this day, he's never watched an episode of Star Trek.
Yeah, I read that recently. Yeah.
He really should. It's pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a good show.
Yeah,
Like, he
what
could
you
skip-
tell him.
He could like skip past all his parts and watch everyone else's.
But I do think it was brave of him to do his own swimming scene
Yes.
in this film, because I remember sitting in the theater going, "Oh, that's why he's concerned about his hair," as he swims past the camera in gigantic close-up.
Oh yeah.
You'll
Yeah.
have to,
I didn't
go
catch
back
that.
and watch it.
Yeah. Well, I got thrown off at first because I was thinking, like, no, Nimoy's the one who swims with the whale, and then I realized what scene you were talking about. But yeah. Oh, and now that was I knew that one was going to be hard, but now I have to defend 5, the most.
Yeah, I have nothing to say about 5.
Okay, so let me think about this for a second. How am I going to do this? I prepped this one last Sunday. Here's the thing I like about 5. I like every criticism you can bring about the directing, about the special effects, about the script. I agree with, and I can't pretend that I don't.
It's
I
under
do
2 hours.
Exactly. No, I do like the story of it a lot. Like if you had somebody else write it, you had somebody else direct it, I think, in some ways it was intended to be the final Star Trek film, and it's the kind of film I would want to be the final frontier. It's just not executed. But I love some of my favorite episodes of the original series were the ones where they went out into the unknown and they encountered things that were, in a very Arthur C. Clarke sense, gods. And they confronted them with toys and stuff. I have a problem with being this late in the game, finding out that Spock has a brother.
Wait till Discovery.
Oh.
Spock has a brother there too.
Oh God. Okay. But I do like the character. I think the character is not terribly acted. There's a great sense of cultism to him. Yeah, it's one of those films that pains me, and it's got a lot of what might have been potential.
Well, not just what might have been. It was literally what might have been. When they were developing Star Trek Phase 2, in the grand tradition of Star Trek, they wrote 2 pilots. One of them became Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and the other one, written by Roddenberry, was called The God Thing, I think.
That sounds familiar. Yeah.
Which was the crew of the Enterprise reunited to go out in space, and this alien claiming to be God was on his way to Earth. But Roddenberry famously was an atheist. So he wrote this script basically to say that all gods are false.
Yeah.
Right? And they took this germ of an idea and revivified it for Star Trek 5, at which point, I think, if I'm correct, was Roddenberry, he was already dead by then, right?
No,
No,
he's
he was still
listed as
alive.
co-writer.
Okay, he's still, okay. And Shatner got his hands on it, and basically he said, you know, he kind of twisted around. I said, well, you know, he didn't address that question. So it was literally, you know, what might have been had it hewed to Roddenberry's original vision. And there are articles out there about the original script that look much more interesting than what this turned out to be.
The opening sequence with the camping is everything that the opening sequence of Star Trek: The Motion Picture is not.
Yes.
I love everything about Star Trek. I love things about Star Trek that other people hate. But even I talk about Star Trek V as the one I pretend didn't happen. Somebody asked on the interwebs today, on the Facebooks, name a movie and a film franchise that you love. Name of a film
Franchise you
hate
love.
and a franchise that you love.
Yeah.
And my immediate answer was five. There are so many cringeworthy moments in it. The fucking fan dance. I try and block it out of my mind.
Yeah. There's
You know,
no defending that. I will.
There are just so many things about it that I wish had never happened. But it's interesting that you mentioned No Shame, because I'm frequently asked, is there anything you wished had never been done at No Shame? And I always say, there are things I wish I'd never seen at No Shame, but nothing I wish had never been done, because everybody who did those things, even the stuff I hated, needed to do them, and needed to do them enough to share them with an audience. And this was my earlier thing about who in their right mind would give writing and directing a major addition to a franchise to somebody who is really proud of the fact that they've never seen an episode of it. Right. Yeah. So that's a problem. We talked earlier about Meyer and not Romero, Autobahn, all of these people who went back and reviewed the tapes. If I believe Shatner, and I don't have any reason not to, he never did that. So he only has his actors' understanding of these characters and their relationships. And famously, everybody hated that actor. I mean, he had so many problematic relationships. But had they not let him direct, had they not, because
get it out of his system,
he would not be able. Who he is would not have been able to suffer Nimoy having 2 films and him never having 1. And he needed to do it. And had 5 not happened, 6 wouldn't have happened. Right. So, you know, and I actually did write a letter to Nicholas Meyer once upon a time saying, thank you for 6. You're the only person who could have saved us from 5. But I'm still grateful. I'm still grateful that 5 happened. And that's all I'm going to say about it.
As long as you never have to watch it again.
Well, you know.
Yeah.
I will say, yeah, I mean, like, I agree with you guys. I rewatched it for this, and I had to pay $3 to rent it online because I didn't own it, and I was mad that I spent $3 on it. I won't deny. In addition to the story idea, I like that. That is something that in later, like, Next Gen has Q, and I'm not trying to ignore Q because Q is fantastic. But like as it progresses, you see less and less of those kind of old cat's eye, kind of just wild, you know, facing, you know, these omnipotent beings. Forgive me, the name of the episode where the person becomes a super intelligent being and keeps getting smarter and smarter and smarter. It's one
Where
of
No
the,
Man Has Gone Before, right?
Yeah.
The second pilot.
Oh,
yeah. You know, like that's some of my favorite Star Trek. And other than the first film, which is largely a remake of Changeling, We didn't get that in the Star Trek movies until 5, and so it's one of those things I wanted to see on the big screen, but it's problematic, and I agree it's problematic because Shatner's ego, and
But
he basically, as a director, plays the Kirk from the first movie. Like, let me do this. I'll adjust the thing, and they're spaghettified.
Well,
but
get this.
I may be remembering incorrectly, but I think even Shatner is apologetic for 5.
I think he is.
Here's, I think, what sums it up. When
Mhm.
Leonard Nimoy was given a chance to direct a film, he said, let's do the crew of the Star Trek save the future. And when William Shatner was given a chance to direct a film, he said, let's do James Kirk finds God.
Yes.
Which is problematic because James Kirk is God. So,
However, I will point out that I think one of the best Kirk moments is in this film.
tell me about it.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. I know it. Yeah.
You know which
Okay.
one I'm going to say.
I know what you're gonna say.
I think he, for like 2 seconds, the 10,000 Monkeys write Shakespeare, and he actually gives a good acting performance. It is the moment where he rejects the pain. Relief.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't want, I need
I
my
need
pain.
my pain. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that moment. I wish it was in a better movie.
I'm sorry. No, you're right. That is a good moment. I thought you were going to say, excuse me, why does God need a starship?
Oh God, no. No.
I want to talk about
That's
costumes.
worse than him kicking.
I
am done with you.
Guy, apparently, but I love the Ike jacket version of the monster maroon suede leather coat that Kirk wears in this film, even
He's got
though
a
it
good
has
coat.
snaps. There's no reason for snaps in the future. 23rd century is not about snaps, but there they are.
Yeah.
But it's
Maybe he was going to take it home after the shoot.
So, do I recommend people watch this film? Only if you enjoy like taking a hammer to your foot. But go on YouTube, do something where you get to see that one scene where somebody offers to take away all the pain of Kirk losing his son, and he refuses because it defines him.
It's an interesting. That moment alone kind of keyed into a part of my own personal life. I was married to someone who was always trying to figure out who she was and needed to find herself, and she found herself kind of drawn into this personality. He was teaching through certain types of Native American philosophies, and but he was also trained in Est. And so he did, so she kind of latched onto this idea, and I was dragged along. I'll just put it that way. I was dragged along into it, and so were our kids. And I sat there, and as he was trying to kind of talk through the whole, because Star Trek V was also coming out during a period of people finding things through crystals and looking for some sort of spiritual awakening or reckoning or whatever, and he sort of guaranteed, in a certain sense, that if you do this work, you will become pain-free. You'll start realizing your better life. And so when watching Star Trek V and seeing Sybok being essentially this kind of cult of personality that he was being, I went, wow, this is really familiar. And when Kirk says, I don't want my pain taken away, I need my pain, it was like an aha moment where I'm looking at my then wife saying, why are we doing this again? Because a lot of our existence is based upon that kind of experience we've had in the past. We do build our decisions based upon what's happened to us or what's happening with us or around us.
And isn't that the lesson of Enemy Within?
Sure. Sure.
I want to give a shout out before we leave it to Lawrence Luckinbill. I did rewatch the film this week. He is very watchable.
Yes.
And I don't know what
And
else.
charismatic.
Yeah. So well cast. And just, I think he might be my favorite part of the film.
And David Warner's in it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love him. I think this is one. I think this, and you'll have to forgive me because I really have only ever seen this once. Because once,
Why would you?
all that I could handle. So if I'm remembering things incorrectly, I apologize. But
Well,
my vague recollection is that this is maybe DeForest Kelley's best Star Trek film.
I would argue 3, because the work he does with.
Because he's dealing with the
Yeah.
Spock inside. But this
That
is
said, yeah.
But I think this again, my memory might be incorrect, and I may be latching on to a life raft, but
Mhm.
but it feels my recollection is that this is the most McCoy-like episode in the way that when he travels back in time to Edith Keeler is a really strong McCoy episode because I mean the ascots are still there and everything, but I think McCoy is elevated in this one in a way that he isn't in other films.
So
He's less of a
famously,
device, he's more of a character.
DeForest Kelley pushed back against his big scene in this film where Sybok is trying to take away his pain, and he recreates a moment when he euthanizes his own father. And in the script, he gives him a hypo spray. And DeForest Kelley said, absolutely not. McCoy would never do that. I refuse to film this scene. He was going to walk off the set, and they had to negotiate with him. And Shatner personally negotiated with him and said, we really need you to, we need you in this film, but this is an important scene. And so the compromise was that instead of using a hypo spray to kill his dad, he uses a tricorder, and like sticks a machine into the slot in the bed, and that's somehow less horrifying. But it's not. I completely agree with DeForest Kelley that McCoy would not have done this, and I'm actually a little perturbed that he went ahead and filmed the scene as it was finally written.
I agree. Hey, I got one more question about faulty memory. And Corey, I commend you for taking one for the team and rewatching it. But okay, Sybok is a renegade Vulcan who embraces his emotion, right?
Yes.
Is there any mention in the film at all that he is essentially a Romulan convert?
No, that's actually something across the movies I find fascinating, is how often we forget about the Romulans. I don't think there's any mention of it that I remember, and if there was,
if that's all it takes, why aren't the Romulans all gods?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's addressed at all. Jumping really quickly back to the DeForest Kelley, I would argue that in the movies, the most DeForest Kelley moment is in the first film, when he is beamed back on from retirement, and he's got his glorious beard, and he just looks like he's just been this like retired player. He's like, what are you guys, man, I was having a really good time. Because he was always it was eclipsed by Shatner's just gravitational black hole of sex, but he was always kind of the ladies' man right next to us.
Absolutely.
He was like,
especially as a person who is increasingly elderly. Thank you, Lord, for allowing me to stay here this long. McCoy is so interesting because, again, if you read like the background books and everything, that he joined Starfleet because of a horrible divorce. And he joined at the last possible minute before he passes
Who doesn't relate to that?
age of eligibility. And so there's always so much that's interesting. And I love how much the actor brought to the character, like
Yeah.
the fact that he refused to take off his pinky ring. And so all of that stuff gets folded into the mythos of that character. He's so great.
It was, you know, and in talking about the first Star Trek movie where he's coming back, I had always kind of fancied that he came back in that beard because he was practicing as a country doctor, and that he wasn't interested in rejoining Starfleet until he got drafted again. So yeah.
Yeah, no, Bones is my favorite character in Star Trek. I love him to death.
Just when you think you're out of Starfleet, they pull you back in.
back in. Carl Urban is the only thing I genuinely love about the redoing of Star Trek. Was they got so lucky casting him in those.
100%. Look,
It was brilliant.
The reboot, the best thing the reboot had going for it was
the cast. Yeah.
Genius. 100% genius.
All right, well, we covered the 3 odd films, so we can stop here. Now, I know I've got to talk. I've set myself up to talk bad about 6, and yeah, like I said from the beginning, this is a fool's errand. But, and I've got a cast member present. I got to do this. This is a great idea, Corey. One thing I do kind of dislike about 6 is I think 2 things. One, the writing feels like it comes off like it thinks it's more clever than it is. And it's like, we're talking about the Cold War. This is an analogy for the Cold War. And I just, you know, it's very hyper referential in that. Guess who's coming to dinner? And as a writer who is very, very guilty of overquoting Shakespeare in plays, Shakespeare has been used throughout Star Trek, and it has been used eloquently.
Conscience of the King.
Yes. However, this one jumps the shark. I like the idea. I know it goes back to Nazism of, like, you know, or actually, is it Soviets or Nazis? I know there's a huge difference in politics there. But you haven't heard it until you've heard it in the original. I think it's the original German is what they're playing on with that line. You know, you haven't heard Hamlet until you've heard it in the original Klingon. That part I was fine with. But then they proceeded to have Christopher Plummer say every single line. Like, all he can say is Shakespeare.
Cry havoc!
Like, that alone would have been fine. But it's just, I love Christopher Plummer. I miss Christopher Plummer. That is my least favorite Christopher Plummer performance. You know, it's just.
I like his eye patches stapled to his head.
I do too.
Well, bolted to his head, actually.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Riveted.
I like how he's oddly, and I know this came later in Star Trek lore, where they finally explained how in the original series they didn't have ridges, and then in the movies they have ridges, and it's because of a virus that affected the Klingons. But I like how they had that weird touch of him not being one of the infected, which kind of played into his sort of sense of purity and superiority. But it's lots of little nitpick things for me with that film. It's the
I prefer the explanation for all of that in the Star Trek role-playing game, where they would make an effort to assimilate prior to invasion with intentional genetic manipulation.
Oh,
My favorite explanation is in Trials and Tribulations when Worf says, "We don't talk about that."
Right.
Yes.
What I really didn't. Again.
Go ahead.
Like I said, I wrote Nicholas Meyer and said you saved the franchise.
Yes.
But what I didn't like was that I agree with you about it opened an interesting door. Why is there honor in claiming that Shakespeare is Klingon.
Mhm.
If you're going to open that door and you're going to explore Klingon psychology, deliver, right?
Yeah. There's a
Uh,
lot of
they
a
did
lot of
not.
superficial things that are.
What I didn't care for is that this is the Star Trek that really let go of an embrace of the science in science fiction. Like, I don't understand why the phaser evaporates the kettle, but not the mashed potatoes. There were so many things that didn't make sense in terms of the generations of established science as part of continuity.
And there were some omissions of kind of lore continuity, like uh, a big thing is made of the bird of prey's cloaking ability, and that they had a new cloaking ability. And at some point, as we're on film 6 now, my memory is starting to get fuzzy in detail, but something about it, I remember going, it's kind of odd that they're not bringing up the fact that that Klingons repurposed Romulan tech. The bird of prey's cloaking ability is purely Romulan.
Yeah, but that's a service of the fans. I mean, for the people who, for the filmmakers, I'm sure they didn't even consider that, because, you'd have to be like a real fan of the original series. And by that point, they're making the film, and they're making this is the 6th film, and Next Generation is on the air.
Which I agree with, if that had been how they'd handled the other films as well. Like, there's a lot of Easter egg rewarded lore for these films as you go through. So, like, by the time you make the 6th film, all that's left in this theater are the fans.
But can we say that this is probably the best remake of the Kane Mutiny ever?
Sure, I can go down with that.
I mean,
but yeah,
they didn't say the strawberries, but there was so much that this film owes Kane Mutiny, and I don't know that it's properly acknowledged.
Nicholas Meyer has always been kind of fond of Shakespeare himself. He originally wanted to title Star Trek II as The Undiscovered Country. So he was waiting for a film to which he could attach that title. Yeah, he was really strongly influenced by Shakespeare and wanted that threading in the film. In the 2 days that I worked on it, and I think he did this with every take, or at least every sequence that he was about to direct, he would open up. He often quoted from the day that I was there, he quoted from The Merchant of Venice. Before he even started to direct the scene, he would just look at this, and he would find this passage, and he would be guided by that passage in terms of how he would approach directing the scene. He's very literate. I mean, he'll quote things, forwards and backwards, and you'll go, man, I have to read that book. But the idea that he motivates himself by reading passages of Shakespeare before he directs that scene, because he felt that scene or that passage of Shakespeare was appropriate to the scene that he was directing. It was an interesting approach.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Has anyone seen his? He did. I forget the proper name of the series, but the Master and Commander series. He did a movie of one of those books. I haven't seen it myself, but
I have not, but I want to give a shout out to David Warner,
again. Yes,
actor, and a long tradition of Star Trek actors who play many different aliens, different. David Warner was terrific in this.
He was,
and I loved his kind of Klingon Lincoln-esque beard.
Yes.
But I also think Kim Cattrall did a terrific job.
Sure.
Yeah, and I guess it's a common story now that they originally wanted to bring Zavik back into the story. That and that we would see the betrayal come from somebody we've already seen established as this cadet early on. I forget, I think Robin Curtis, they were looking at maybe getting Robin Curtis back, or perhaps even Kirstie Alley, but I think Kirstie Alley's commitment to Cheers was what prevented her from returning. But yeah, Savick and the highly watchable Kim Cattrall was brought in instead. I'd never met Kim Cattrall. I wish I had, but I did have a chance to meet Leonard Nimoy in person.
cool.
It was early on. And actually it was through kind of a connection. I had been cast but not scheduled to go on yet, but I managed to go to the office where he was there, and the producers were working on him to lose a little weight, because he I guess was a little heavier in Star Trek V, and so Nimoy, being one of the executive producers, wanted to kind of slim back down, but I did something that was a little maybe not proper. But I heard that he had been trying to avoid eating a lot of sugary candy, and his favorite candy bar was the Nestle Crunch bars. And I went to one of those, gosh, it's not around anymore, but one of those membership stores that are similar to Costco. And I bought one of those vendor boxes of Nestle's Crunch. It was early enough, they hadn't started filming yet. And we just brought it in and said, oh yeah, I've got a little something here for you. And he looked, and he had that laugh that, if you know how, how he is when he laughs, he appreciated the gesture, said he didn't really need it right now, but he kept it anyway. I don't know if he ended up eating it all after we wrapped, but that was kind of one of those moments where I got to meet, well, I was going to say Shatner, but yeah, when I did my scene on the second day, I got called back after I washed up. I got called back in to the studio because they said they needed a wild track of me screaming as though I was being tossed out into the snow. And so I arrived, and I thought I was going to go into a booth, and they said, no, we'll just record it here on the Rura Pente set. And they were getting ready to work out that whole Martia becoming Kirk and the fight together. And so I managed to get a glimpse of Iman, but she, in jeans and a t-shirt, so that was fun. But they stopped everything. I mean, they said, hold please for wild track. And suddenly everybody in the crew stopped and turned to look at me to do this recording. And so they had the sound recordist, they started rolling, they marked it. And Meyer turned his back because he just wanted to hear it. So I did 3 different takes of it. And he then gave a thumbs up and stopped. They stopped recording, and I was being released, and I looked over, and Shatner was watching this happen, and he gave me a little applause, and I went, that was cool, and off I went. It was kind of a moment I never expected to have, but it was that one was with me. It still is.
And it would have been so easy for them to just put in a Wilhelm scream instead.
Wouldn't you think?
But, yeah.
But the irony is they didn't use any of the wild track, and they brought somebody else in to do my grunting and groaning after I land. So it was it's funny. That's showbiz, I guess.
I just want to quickly throw in, because that's such a great story about Shatner giving an actor what an actor needs, which is praise.
Yeah.
And
I
want my wife and I am too, but my wife really is a huge Buck Owens fan. And one of her great regrets in life is that we never went to see Buck Owens live in concert when we had a chance. And that regret played to my benefit when at the Ticonderoga original set series tour James Cawley does a couple of years ago, he had an event called Christmas with the Captains, where Shatner and Anson Mount were both going to be there over Christmas. And she said, I don't want you to have a Buck Owens regret. So she let me fly up there on my own and go spend a weekend at Ticonderoga. And I got to spend, I did the VIP package. And I won't say that I, became pals with William Shatner, but I did get to spend enough time with him to know that he is a genuine human being.
Yeah.
Despite all the stories, all human beings have the potential to be jerks. And I'm confident that he has been a jerk to George and all of the other people who, and I don't know what the division was between he and Leonard, but he was such a genuine human being. And even when things happened that he wasn't crazy about, he did not express his displeasure in front of the fans. Like, I know that the day he arrived, he walked through and everybody was kind of taking pictures and being close to him. And then the next day there was a lot more security, but he was just great. And the day that we all went to kind of the after thing, and I know it was set up, probably pitched to Bill that it was going to be a small gathering and it was everybody. But I will take to my grave the experience of Bill Shatner being my bartender and just, telling crazy stories from behind the bar as he served me my drinks and stuff and everybody else in the room. And again, nobody else had that close a contact with him on the next day. But I was nervous that things had gone badly enough that time that he wasn't going to come back, but he has consistently come back over and over again. And for somebody who has a reputation of being a jerk, he is so generous and loving to his fans. So maybe it's different now, but your story, Doug, about Shatner giving you as an actor what you needed with some applause is terrific, and I'm grateful to hear it.
Yeah, I think overall it was a high point in my little acting career to be part of this movie, and to know that it was going to be the final movie with this kind of this rushed decision and a change of executives during that period, where they got a lot of money, then they got money taken away, and then they got money back, and it was a back and forth from a budgetary standpoint. But everybody on the crew was just great. The only complaint I had was, and it's a minor one considering that where I was and how lucky I was to be there, were the fact that they put milky contact lenses on me. And it's the one and only time that I wore contact lenses in my entire life. And it was painful. It was just rough. The second day was actually involving the close-up. The landing in front of the camera and the close-up as everybody went down, and having the death stare while the fans were running and while the plastic snow was falling. It was one of the hardest things to maintain. And the only time that Nick Meyer was a hint without empathy, because they had to shoot that close up three times, and they said, okay, let's run this again. Doug, don't blink. And I I would say, I'm sorry, I'm just not used to contact lenses. And Meyer said, well, I have contact lenses and I have no trouble with it. And I'm thinking, yeah, lie here on your side and in this under all this stuff, and tell me you have no trouble with this, with milky contact lenses. And then because my eyes dried up. They broke everybody for lunch, and two assistants from the makeup department had to flush my eyes continuously in order to get those contacts off me. Yeah, I think I was pretty convinced I wouldn't be wearing contacts forever.
So if anyone listening to this or finds this does go on to explore filmmaking, please do not make your cast wear full contacts, obscuring contacts, if the shot doesn't need it.
Well, that's a great connection to where No Man Is Gone Before, the second pilot, right? Because wasn't the actor in that, he had to wear, like, I mean, they weren't tinfoil contacts, but they were
reflective. Yeah. But barring all of that, I wrote a letter after I wrapped. I wrote a letter to Nicholas Meyer and thanked him. Actually, I wrote one to Leonard Nimoy also, and I thanked both of them for a great experience that I had with this shoot. I befriended William Morgan Shepherd. That was, we were kind of next door trailer neighbors, and we just sat and chatted. He loved that I knew of him from Max Headroom. That, it was just overall. And I remember when they wrapped me and I was leaving and I was saying goodbye, I said goodbye to William Morgan Shepherd, and he said, "Son, as long as you keep having fun, it'll be just fine." And I said, "Yeah, thank you." But I wrote, and actually Nicholas Meyer wrote back to me, and it was a very brief note on Paramount letterhead, and it's framed somewhere in storage. But he said, "Your response is as sweet as it was unnecessary," and he thanked me for my professionalism. So there it is.
Yeah.
Like I said, framed somewhere, but a great experience to work on.
I just want to go full on drama professor for 1 second, because I think it needs to be said. George Lucas read Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces,
Of course,
and chose to create a mythology, not a film. And we have Star Wars as a result. To my knowledge, Gene Roddenberry never read Joseph Campbell. He did it accidentally. I mean, the contributions that Star Trek has made to the universe, I don't think can be adequately weighed and measured. Like up to and including James Doohan's ashes being smuggled aboard the International Space Station. Right?
Yes.
The amount, the impact, and Roddenberry is a very flawed human being, and he never would have survived #MeToo. But his contributions cannot be discounted. The impact that Star Trek has had on the known universe is never going to be insubstantial.
No arguments here. Yeah, no, and I think also just when you have someone like Gene Roddenberry, you're bringing up kind of the criticism of him. Star Trek is more than like Gene deserves the credit for creating it, for shepherding it over the years.
But it's bigger than him.
But it is, like, there are so many amazing writers that have worked on it. And I mentioned Harlan Ellison just because he's one of my favorite writers, but going through the years, this
and DC Fontana, let's not, and what he was, again, a flawed person trying to get across the value of imagining a more perfect future is so important. And he did that.
Yeah. I don't have any desire to say anything more negative about 6. It's more of just a foil for the initial premise of the show. But frankly, the ultimate goal is to get people to not do that terrible piece of advice, which is just watch 2, 3, 2, 4, and 6. Just skip the others. No, they all have things in them worthwhile. Even 5, as bad as 5
Yeah.
is. But
Everybody
no.
should watch it at least once.
Yes, you
And,
should share.
and as I have actually said to some of my own students who have come to me with a request to get their tuition back, I have said, did you learn anything, even if it was by negative example? And they have said to a 1, oh yes, I've learned a great deal by negative example. I said, well, okay.
Exactly. Thank you all so much. I wanted to give you all a chance to, if there's anything you want to promote, anything you're working on, websites we should visit, upcoming theater things that starts to slowly become a reality again. Floor
Hey,
is
the best
open.
place to learn storytelling is the Playwrights Lab at Hollins University. Google it.
Here, here.
Yes.
I'm actually, because of COVID-19, I had started directing. I'm a director over at the Lonnie Chapman Theater in North Hollywood here in California. And one of the projects I started working on that was supposed to open April 10th of last year was postponed, not canceled, postponed. So we've been using this little tool called Zoom to gather my actors on screen and to rehearse a show that we hope will open in the fall of this year as things start opening up a little bit more here in the state. It is, in my experience, the longest period of time I have ever directed a play. But in fact, in our last rehearsal, I said, well, I believe we're in year 2 of our rehearsals. So it has a lot of layers of teaching in terms of our own stamina and our ability to get through this and to band together. Amazingly, I've not lost, I've only lost 2 cast members, and there are 12 in the cast. So it has been, it shows that a lot of our actors in the company are still committed and still anxious and still wanting to perform.
Cool. And where can we follow that?
Well, on Facebook and most social media, it's the Group Rep or Group Rep Theater. And it's, yeah, you can just check it there. Little, there'll be news about it as we get into the
Sure.
fall.
And I just want to say that I want to thank you, Corey, for doing this and for inviting us and be open to my suggestions. And Star Trek.
I knew about Doug. We're just being so. No, thank you.
Star Trek allowed me to sit here on screen with Doug Engalla, who is literally one of my oldest friends. We have known each other since we were teenagers. At least I was a teenager.
Yeah.
We did radio and theater together back in the old day, and also here with my teacher, my friend, the director of my current theater program, that I came back and rediscovered theater after several decades away, Todd Ristau and the Hollins Playwright Lab. So to be able to bring everyone like this together under one virtual roof and to talk about Star Trek, it's just a beautiful opportunity.
Yeah, no, I mean, how could I have said no to any of you guys? Like, it's one of those things I threw out there and everyone says yes. But yeah, no, I mean, Todd's one of the 5 people that got me to the theater, like, period.
Yeah. Well, yeah, when Sean came to me about it, I went, sounds like fun.
Yeah. And Sean,
Sorry,
of course,
you were always an inspiration for me. I want you to actually hear that and know that. Every time you got up to do your weird shit at No Shame Theater, there was a part of me as a producer that was like, holy fuck, what's going to happen now? And there was a part of me as an audience member that was like, I can't wait to find out what's going to happen next. I'm so grateful that you and other people from that really vibrant time, including like, Jane and all those other people, are still being true to themselves and following their points of inspiration and continuing to build on who they are, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So thank you, Corey. Thank you, Corey, not just for inviting me to be here, because I'm grateful for that, but thank you, Corey, for being you and continuing to be more you every day.
I think that's what Star Trek's all about, isn't it? Just being more than
Amen.
what, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, when got out of college and started making our own theater, it was just like we're sitting on sets and we're like carving styrofoam and painting stuff, and it's like, this is ridiculous. But we'd seen so much good be done with rubber suits and ridiculousness and, this operatic, melodramatic style of acting. Say what you will about Shatner's acting. Any man that performs in Esperanto is okay by me.
Pretending is the first step to becoming.
Yeah. But thank you all so much for coming out. This was
Thank you so
wonderful.
much.
All right.
Nice to meet you, Doug. Nice to see you, Sean. You look
Nice to
great.
meet you, and Todd.
Take
Thank
care.
you. Good to see
I
you.
accepted your friend request. So yeah, there you go.
Take care, everyone, and thank you.
Take care.